Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the first in a new series that I am calling Anatomy of Makeup. So outside of YouTube, if you don't already know, I am a biological anthropologist and an osteologist. So that means that I study bones, skeletal anatomy, and comparative anatomy, but in a skeletal way. And one of the things that I found really helpful as I learned makeup over the last few years was using my knowledge of the skull and skeletal anatomy to help inform me how to do my makeup, where to put products. Knowing my face shape has really helped me fine-tune where I place my products. I see all the time on Instagram and TikTok videos of where should you put your contour, where should you put your blush, and filters that are used to do that. And most of the time they're not very effective, and I see people try the filters and they don't work. So I want to make this series a way of using your own facial shape, like understanding your facial shape and how to use that to improve the way that you do your makeup, so you don't need those filters and stuff. So I want to use this series as a way to help you understand your own facial shape and your facial anatomy and how you can use that to better do your makeup without needing those TikTok filters and stuff. So I'm not a trained makeup artist, but I am an anatomist, and I do think that knowing and understanding your face shape can be really beneficial in your makeup application. And if you are fully new here, hi, my name is Colin. I'm a non-binary Latinx scientist and lover of makeup with a particularly strong interest in indie makeup and high-end makeup. And I tend to take a pretty analytical approach to my reviews and my collection in general, and I have new content every week, so I'd love to have you subscribe. So for the first part of the series, I'm going to talk about sculpting your face and how to use your facial anatomy to put on bronzer or contour or both, and how understanding your face shape can help you with that. I will do other parts in other videos later on. And I think I'm going to organize this into chunks. So I'm going to talk about the basics of contour and bronzer in general. Then we're going to talk about understanding your facial anatomy and your face shape. And then I'll go into a demo showing you some of the differences and how placing things differently has an effect on your face and the way your makeup comes out. So the first part, basics, bronzer versus contour. I see them conflated quite a bit, but they are different things. So bronzer is meant to bronze, it's meant to warm up the skin, it's meant to mimic like if you were in the sun. So generally you want to pick a shade. If you do tan, you want to pick a shade for bronzer that looks like the color you get around the perimeter of your face or the high points of your face when you're in the sun. Oftentimes I see people buy really orange bronzers and they just don't look right. You generally want something that works with your skin tone. So like Haus Labs has a really great range with rosy, peachy undertones, neutral undertones, golden undertones, things like that. Generally, especially if you're really fair, I would do like a neutral or a rosy and so on, but it just takes some practice finding the right shade. Contour, on the other hand, is about adding structure, about adding shadow to your face. So highlights are to bring things forward, and contour or shadows are to push things back in space. And you can do a really heavy contour and you can do a really subtle one, but it's all about adding a shadow and mimicking that. So you want a contour to be cool toned. I have seen people on TikTok lately say that bronzer should be warm, and by warm they meant kind of orange, and they said contour should be gray. And contour shouldn't be gray unless you are really fair skinned. It should be cool toned though. So I have a couple examples to show you. So like when you look at the Linda Hallberg, the Eldridge Cosmetics Infinity palettes, they have products in them that are meant to be bronzers or contours. So when you look at the Infinity palette, the original one, you've got some really cool tone shades, especially this one, that would work well as a contour on fair skin, fair to light medium, and then you have a warm bronzer. It's very warm. And then when you look at the deep version, you have still cool tone, but not gray, because gray is just gonna look ashy on anyone my skin tone or darker. So you want it to be cool toned without being actually gray. I know Milk Makeup just announced some new contour shades similar to the bronzy stick, and it's kind of a weird shade range where it jumps from like 3 to 4 is a huge jump, but they are actually cool toned, which I really appreciate. Because a lot of the time brands say it's a contour, but it's really just a bronzer, kind of a neutral bronzer. So I appreciate that they're actually cool toned. But if you look, so when you look at these again, this is just gonna be ashy on anyone medium to dark or deep. But something like this isn't going to be as ashy. And it's really about finding the right shade that works for your skin tone. I know Fenty has a lot of shades. Some of the ones they call contours are pretty warm, but they tend to be neutral to cool at least. So it's about finding what's right for your skin tone, but there is a difference, and you can use both. You can use either. I tend to use bronzer and not contour unless I'm doing a very dramatic look. And my way of sculpting the face by using bronzer is using a bronzer that is a little darker than your skin tone and leans a little more neutral. So like, I really like the Haus Labs one. It's a good golden neutral tone, and it is definitely darker than my skin tone, although not like crazy dark, but it's just enough dark that when I use it, it adds that depth and sculpt that I want, but without having to go through actually contouring. It's like a subtle sculpt to the face. The Fenty cream bronzer that I have is also really good for this because it's got kind of a golden olive undertone. So this is technically the bronzer for tan skin. This is the shade Teddy, but the undertone works really well. So blended out, it just looks natural on my skin tone. The Melt one, also very similar, darker. I mean, it's lighter than it looks in the pan, but it adds that depth. A lot of brands will release contours for pale skin that are actually cool toned, and then as they get darker, they just get warm and they just become bronzers. So like the Makeup by Mario, which is what I'll probably use in the demo today because it's easy to draw on and draw shapes. In the light and the light medium, it's pretty cool tone and works well to sculpt the face, but it's not gray or ashy, but it does lean a little cool. But the medium, you start getting just like warm golden, and so it's neutral enough that I can use it, but I would never call this a contour. It is more of a bronzing sculpt. But they do call it a contour stick, but this is not really a contour color. It is a little too warm, in my opinion. And it looks like the construction outside has started back up after a couple of days, even though it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So there might be some weird machine noises outside. I do apologize for that. And then I have the Lunar Beauty Outer Dimension palette that I got in that mystery box, but you can see Manny picked specifically neutral leaning tones because it's kind of fits more skin tones. It also can do kind of both. And even I can use like a sheer layer of the really dark ones as kind of a contour, which is nice. But obviously most people don't need that many shades. But the reason this is laid out the way it is you have your brightening shades to highlight and bring forward, and then you have shades to add depth and dimension to your face. So, okay, so for the next part of this, I do want to talk about your facial anatomy. I'm going to talk about and describe and show you on my face mine so that you can use that for yours. I do also have one of my anatomy textbooks here that I will show, but because it does have pictures of bones, I will give a warning before I show that and a little timestamp in case that's something that like creeps you out or scares you or is something that you don't like. That way you can skip that little bit. Okay, so when you're talking about sculpting your face, the things that I see people wanting to do are bring out their cheekbones, make their forehead smaller, sometimes change the shape of their nose. I'll probably talk about nose contour in a separate video because that is a very specific thing. And then jawline are the things that I see people tend to put contour on. So when you're doing your jaw, I'll talk about this in the demo, but your face shape, your skull is made up of a bunch of bones, quite a few bones, most of them really small, but your main part is the actual cranium, and then you have your jawbone, your mandible. So your mandible is the bone that goes around here, all the way over to here. And some people want to emphasize the shape of it, and some people want to hide it, so I will talk about that. And then the other thing that where people put bronzer and contour is here. So you're sculpting the face. So everybody has cheekbones. Technically, that is your zygomatic bone or your zygomatic arch. So you have your zygomatic bone that goes from here, like in your actual cheek, and then around to your temple, basically. And it's flat right here. And then you have an actual arch right here. And so when you're wanting to emphasize that and add a structure to it or make it look like you have bigger cheekbones than you actually do, generally you want to put the shadow underneath it, because that's going to sink that part of your face in and make that part pop out. I like to put stuff up here right above my arch to kind of push that in as well. Also, my face shape kind of does that anyway. Bronzer you can put there, but it's not going to look like a shadow. So if you're trying to figure out where to put your product, it's important to know where your cheekbone is. Everybody has them. There's lots of variation in the size, the shape, how prominent they are, but everybody has them, and it just takes a little time of like feeling your face and feeling it. Like you can feel I can feel it right here, go all the way up, and then I can feel it kind of curve in and curve in. So it's just a matter of feeling it in your face and understanding where it is and the shape of it. The reason that you have that bone there is because of your chewing muscles. So you have your masseter muscle, which is one of your chewing muscles. That's why they call it mastication, chewing. And it goes from the bottom of that bone right here to the bottom of your jawline. So it's connecting here to here. So when you're opening and closing your mouth, it is stretching and contracting. And it's also what's going to give some of the shape here. And then the rest of it, the reason that it sticks out a bit is because you have muscles that go from your temple. You have your temporalis muscle that goes from up here, and you can kind of feel it when you do this. I can feel it right there. So that goes underneath and behind that bone through the little arch that it makes and connects to the top of your jawbone. So all of this is about chewing and holding your jaw in place. So I'm going to show you some pictures just to kind of give you an idea of what the bones look like and how, outside of just my face. So I will put a timestamp warning so you can skip ahead the like 30 seconds or so that you need, if you feel the need to. So this is the textbook that I'm using and talking about, just called Human Osteology. This is the 3rd edition. There might be a new one, but it doesn't really matter for this. So it's a big heavy book. So I'm going to put it on my shoulder. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is your zygomatic. Right here, you have it right underneath your eyes, and then it loops right here. And if you look at it from the side, you can see, and if you look at it from the side, you can kind of see that shape. So the bottom of it right here is what connects down here, and the muscle is up here where you can see kind of the lines from them go through that hole and go down here. So there's actually just a big hole behind it. And it's really just there to protect those muscles. If you look at it from above, you can see that space right there. The bigger the chewing muscles, the bigger the space. So like for me, some of the species I look at have been extinct for 3 million years, but they had really big chewing muscles because they had really big jaws. So their cheekbones are huge. So I also forgot to grab my lethal shadows. So they sell bronzers and contours in singles, which I really appreciate. So you don't have to buy a whole palette, and you can also buy the ones you want. But this is, again, what I'm talking about. So you've got a cool tone shade. This is actually too cool for my skin tone. This was when I was first starting to learn. And this is a bronzer. This bronzer I can use and I do enjoy, but you can see it's much warmer. This is much colder. And you can use both, but they can get muddy if you place them incorrectly. So generally, if you're going to use both, I would put the contour underneath your cheekbone and the bronzer on and above to add that shape. For me, I put my bronzer on and it sculpts my face. Okay, so now for the demo, I'm going to show you a much harsher bronzer or contour than I would actually wear in real life, but I just want to point out, emphasize what it looks like, and also make sure you can see it on camera. So I'm going to use the Mario stick because it is easy to draw on. And on one side, I'm going to put it underneath my cheekbone to try and add a little bit of that sculpt and dimension that way. And on the other side, I'm gonna put it where I normally would, for bronzer at least, on my cheekbone, which is going to help add some lift to my face, which is generally what I want anyway. So like I said, I have the shade medium in this, and I do like it. I don't think I will rebuy this just because it's not my favorite bronzer, and it's not really a contour, but it is a nice formula. Also, this does have a brush at the end of it, but I'm not gonna use that today. I'm just gonna use like a Sigma brush or something. So if you're wanting to really sculpt your face and add in a real contour, you're gonna wanna put it underneath the bone because that's where the shadow would be from the bone itself. Your bone, if you have a really prominent zygomatic or cheekbone, it's going to create a shadow underneath. So that's what you're trying to mimic. So you wanna feel where it is. So it's right here for me. And I don't have any other makeup on. I have some brow gel, some lip oil, and some concealer just to like even out my under eyes and stuff. But it's gonna be right here is my cheekbone. So I'm gonna place this right under my cheekbone. And you can even, you know, if you have a good contour shade, you can even lightly go through here and kind of add in that hollowed out look that people are trying to achieve by, you know, getting their buccal fat removed. Buccal fat just means it's part of your cheeks. Like this is the buccal side of your teeth, and then the side on the inside is the lingual side because tongue. But this fat in your cheeks tends to go away as you age already. So that's why people are saying it looks like these movie stars and stuff are prematurely aging themselves. It's because they are. But that is underneath my cheekbone. So that's where I would put it if I wanted to actually contour. And then for me, I also like to put a little bit here because my temple does dip in and then it goes out from my bone. So I have a little bit of a dip here and then I can feel the bone right here. So it dips in. So I like to put a little bit right there as well. And then if I'm shaping my forehead, I put a little bit right here because I have a big forehead and I want it to look a little smaller. And then you want to blend that into your hairline when you do blend it. And for this side, I'm going to do what I would normally do to bronze, and I'm going to find my cheekbone. I mean, I know where it is naturally, so I don't have to fill it out every time, but I'm going to say, okay, my cheekbone's right here, and I'm going to put it on the cheekbone, and then a little bit there. And then I don't have a lot of space there, but I have a little space right here where I can kind of add in that concealer brightening as well, kind of emphasize. Because you want to have light and dark next to each other. If you just have dark everywhere or you just have light everywhere, you're losing that dimension. You want to have light and dark next to each other, and that contrast is what gives you that sculpt. And then for the jawline, I like to emphasize the shape of my jaw. It's a little more noticeable on this side than this side. So what I like to do is I like to contour it by emphasizing the shape. So I put a little bit underneath and a little bit behind, but underneath behind the bone. So I'm putting my jawbone ends right here. So I'm putting it behind the jawbone to add a fake shadow behind it. And you can see this is where this is a little warmer than a shadow would really be on me. And I'm adding that to push the area around the bone behind and emphasize the shape of my jawbone. If I want to do the opposite, I would find the edge of the bone right here and I would draw on the bone itself and kind of push the edge of it back, and that'll help hide that. If you are someone that has a very square jawline and you're trying to like hide it, you don't want to contour around the jawbone, you want to put it on the jawbone to kind of push that back. So I'm going to start blending this out in a second. Okay, so I'm gonna now blend this out, and I'm just using a stiff brush from Sigma. This is the small contour brush. I really like this. And I'm going to tap this out. And because this is a little bit of a bronzer as well, I'm tapping upward to have that bronze effect go up. But I'm mostly just tapping right where it is. And so by putting it here, obviously a much thicker swatch than I would actually wear on a day-to-day, the depth is right here underneath the bone, and then the warmth of this as it blends out is just kind of going up on it to mimic that that lift and that sculpt of bronzer. And then I'm just gonna tap this out and blend out the forehead. You always want to make sure you're going into your hairline so it doesn't look like you have a weird mark. Obviously, this is a lot more bronzer than I would actually wear. By putting that around my forehead, it brightens the middle and it makes it look smaller. That's why some people like Angelica Nyquist doesn't really put stuff on her forehead, because she says she has a small forehead and she doesn't want to make it look even smaller. I have a big forehead, so I do want it to look a little smaller. And then once most of it's blended out, I just kind of blend the edges on the middle part as well. And then I'll blend this. And again, I'm pushing to blend it and make sure it stays where I want it. I'm pushing it down, not up. I'm tapping it into where I want the color and blending my tapping. I'm not swiping it down too much. A little bit to make the shadow look real, and if you need, you can put it here and kind of push this back. I know a lot of people will do it right here to kind of make this look smaller. But again, especially if you're doing kind of a sculpting like around here, you don't want to use something too warm. I saw someone recently on TikTok do a full like really dramatic sculpt, but and she said I'm using contour, and then she was using like bright orange on really fair like European English skin, and it just looked weird. She didn't look sculpted. She just looked like she had an orange mask on. And that's, you want to avoid that, and that's why you want to go more neutral to cold. And then for this, because I'm trying to pat it out on my jawline, I'm just still tapping where it is. I'm not buffing, I'm not swiping. I'm stippling it into the skin. And then especially if you add like some powder right here that matches your skin tone to clean it up, that can bring that forward, which then brings that back even more. That's why a lot of drag queens, or if you're really sculpting your face, you do a harsh contour, and they'll do like Trixie Mattel does that really straight line of bright right there. It's because it adds that effect. It makes the brights look brighter and the darks look darker, and it adds that actual sculpt. And then again, for this one, I'm making sure I don't go down too much, so I'm patting it upward. And I personally like to do more bronzer here and up because it adds more of a lift to the face, kind of like putting your eyeshadow up here versus down here is going to add a lift to your eye. It's the same kind of effect. Even the way I do my blush and everything, it's all about adding a lift to my face. And we'll talk about blush in another video. So there it is, all blended out. And this is more the shape that I normally do, just a little darker, where I have the bronzer here and up here, and it's really lifting, it's pulling this back this way. And then once I add a little bit of brightening concealer here and some powder and stuff, it'll add to that effect. On this side, it's going underneath my jawbone and it's adding that shadow, and so it's making my jawbone, hopefully on camera you can see this because in person I definitely can, this looks lifted and this looks sculpted. So you can do both, you can do a combo, but like I said, if you're going to do a sculpt, you want to keep the cool tones down here and the warm tones right up here, and then kind of use that blush to marry between them. That way they don't turn to mud. Because if you're mixing a cool brown and a warm brown, you're gonna get kind of a weird color in the middle. And then I can clean up a little bit by using my powder brush and really brushing right here to kind of emphasize the brightness, which then makes that look darker. And then if I was actually doing my makeup, I would do a little bit less and I would blend it and use a finishing powder or something, but that is for the effect. And I will take a little bit of contour. I'll take one of the ones from the Lunar Beauty palette, so you just kind of re-emphasize what I'm talking about. I'm gonna take the really dark color because it is very cool toned, and I just picked it up on a little brush. And I'll just kind of re-emphasize the shadow there. So you can see it's adding, because it's cool and dark, it's adding a shadow and adding like a sculpted round shape right here to my jaw, to my face. And then if I do the same over here, you can kind of see how they work side by side together to add that sculpt. So this is adding the warmth and the lift, and the cool tone is adding a little bit of that. It's making it look like my jawbone. I mean, my jaw does this a little bit, but it's adding like that scoop down, which just makes your cheekbone look bigger. Okay, so that is it for sculpting the face. I hope this is interesting. I hope this was helpful. I will obviously have more of these. I want to do nose contour, blush. We can talk about highlighting. If there's anything in particular that you would like me to feature or talk about in a future video, let me know in the comments below. Like I said, I really hope this was helpful. I hope you find this interesting. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.